An issue that seems to be haunting the Trump administration in the wake of Saturday's airstrikes in Iran. The question is, has Iran's nuclear program been, as Donald Trump asserted Saturday night and has repeated every day since, obliterated? As they keep using that word over and over again. At a press conference this morning, Fox News weekend host turned America's Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, tore into the news media for daring to report on a preliminary assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency that claims that the bombings may have set Iran's nuclear program back by only a few months at best. We'll spare you a replatforming of all of his aggressive attacks on the media for a second, because real news was made. We did learn some new stuff at this press conference. We just didn't learn it from Pete Hegseth. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, refused to say that the strikes, quote, obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities, as Donald Trump keeps saying. Watch.
On Sunday, you said final battle damage will take some time. And you also said, I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. That was just over 3 days ago. So what has changed? Would you use the term obliterated as well?
Sure, like I said, we don't do BDA. I'll refer that to the intelligence community.
And that right there is actually the whole issue that's being debated. Were the strikes successful in terms of hitting targets? Yes. But did the strikes deliver the result that the administration says they did and says they wanted? As ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Jim Himes puts it, quote, the only question that matters is whether the Iranian regime has the stuff necessary to build a bomb. And if so, how fast? Obliterating the sites means nothing if the Iranians moved enough 60% uranium centrifuges and other weaponization tools to build a bomb at some possibly unknown location. The regime may be vile, but they are not stupid. And this stuff can be relatively easily relocated. So let me show you more from this press conference. Here's what happened when Fox News' Pentagon reporter, Hegseth's former colleague, Jennifer Griffin, asked the incredibly important and respectful and relevant question whether the Iranians moved uranium out of the Fordo site.
Do you have certainty that all the highly enriched uranium was inside the Fordo mountain, or some of it, because there were satellite photos that showed more than a dozen trucks there 2 days in advance? Are you certain none of that highly enriched uranium was moved?
Of course, we're watching every single aspect, but Jennifer, you've been about the worst, the one who misrepresents the most intentionally. What the president says. I'm familiar.
Report about the ventilation shafts on Saturday night. And in fact, I was the first to describe the B-2 bombers, the refueling, the entire mission with great accuracy. So I take issue with that.
Jennifer, you're the worst. If you missed the first part of that statement, that was America's Secretary of Defense saying to Fox's highly respected, highly credible, highly experienced Pentagon correspondent, quote, Jennifer, you're the worst. And you saw her there take issue with the assessment and go on to defend her reporting, none of which has been disproven. It's just a taste of what happened today at the Pentagon from the Secretary of Defense, whose salary is paid for by all of our taxpayer dollars. Now, a different line of questioning from a different reporter, Hegseth did something different. He said he was, quote, not aware of any intelligence suggesting, quote, things were not where they were supposed to be, end quote. Whatever that means. Buried in what was a mountain of details about the mission from Kane and an onslaught of attacks on the press like the one we just played for you by Pete Hegseth is an alarming question. Why does the Trump administration respond to questions from reporters or lawmakers trying to ascertain the success of the mission in striking Iran's nuclear program by attacking everybody asking those questions, forcing the press and the American people and lawmakers with oversight responsibilities to go other places for key facts? New York Times is today reporting that the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency said this, quote, there was no escaping significant physical damage. but that it would be, quote, too much to assert that Iran's nuclear program had been, quote, wiped out after the Israeli and American bombing campaign. The source, Mr. Grossi, noted that not all of Iran's nuclear sites had been struck and said Iranian officials had told him that they would take protective measures for the uranium they had already enriched. Still, he added, the nuclear program has definitely suffered, quote, enormous damage. Breaking in just the last few minutes, senators are emerging from a classified briefing given to them by Trump administration officials on this big question, on this big issue of how effective, what the consequence of the airstrikes are, whether they succeeded in taking out Iran's nuclear program or, quote, obliterating it, as Trump keeps claiming. Question everyone's trying to sift through and find a true answer to. After the briefing, there's a dispute now in the readout between Republicans and Democrats. Here's Democratic Senator Chris Murphy's takeaway from the briefing.
To me, it still appears that we have only set back the Iranian nuclear program by a handful of months.
You know, we've had actions for the last 70 years in the Middle East, and Israel and the United States have always been successful. It may be that we did more damage than what the Defense Intelligence Agency thinks.
Is this a significant foreign policy win for the Trump administration?
It is, but let's look at it. It is, to be fair, it is.
Send a message to Iran that the United States is willing to do just about anything to protect Israel.
Those are just three examples here on our air on MSNBC with experts we call upon, some of whom have government experience, including General Clark, talking positively about aspects of this. And yet, this is an administration that, as you just saw in that odd or unusual hectoring presentation from a Pentagon chief who used to be at Fox, wants to debate the role of the press or try to give out orders. And I don't care which party's in power, the government doesn't give out orders to the press about how to cover things in the United States. As for the Trump administration overseed intel, it was leaked from inside the Trump administration to the New York Times, stating that the initial assessment thought those strikes partially damaged the nuclear facilities, setting them back by, quote, a few months. Financial Times reported on early assessments in Europe, indicating Tehran was able to actually move some of the uranium stockpile ahead of the strikes. Satellite images showed a convoy of trucks outside one of the facilities days before. You can see that there. This is how intelligence works, kind of a piecemeal, a mosaic, if you will, to try to understand what happened. And a new CIA report seems to push back on what was that initial leak and discusses how they view the Iran site as severely damaged, key aspects destroyed. Now, that's a little bit of the picture. And General Clark also told us over time, intelligence tends to hopefully get better, so you get more of the picture. The administration, though, courted this clash by, according to their own initial assessment, overstating the success, with Trump claiming, quote, obliteration.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
We believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there.
We have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program.
We are confident, yes, that Iran's nuclear sites were completely and totally obliterated.
Those pilots hit their targets. Those targets were obliterated.
Obliterated. It's not a coincidence when 5 different people who work together keep saying obliterated. Obliterated and totally destroyed is a factual claim. And the Trump administration oversees intelligence that doesn't match that. And the history of misstating or spinning intelligence in the Middle East is a long and big problem, one that Trump used to criticize when it was done in the Bush administration. Trump is now attacking specific journalists, trying to use government power to oust or get fired a reporter at CNN over this issue. Hegseth, you saw, calling out outlets, launching probes about the leak of the preliminary intelligence. Senators also discussing the apparent uncertainty here after a briefing today.
To me, it still appears that we have only set back the Iranian nuclear program by a handful of months. There's no doubt there was damage done to the program, but the allegations that we have obliterated their program just don't seem to stand up to reason.
Let me turn to the press clash, which so much has been normalized lately, but there's nothing acceptable about the Pentagon trying to lecture reporters about how to cover facts, and especially in concert with the intimidation tactics. And interestingly, it's even gotten into a bit of a civil clash at Fox, where, of course, Pete Hegseth most recently worked. Take a look at this exchange.
Jennifer, you've been about the worst, the one who misrepresents the most intentionally. What the president says.
I'd like to say a word, if I may, Dana, about Jennifer Griffin, who was attacked by the defense secretary today, an attack she certainly, in my view, did not deserve. Her professionalism, her knowledge, and her experience at the Pentagon is unmatched. And I have had and still have the greatest regard for her. The attack on her was unfair.
Is the Pentagon under Trump here and Hegseth out of line? And is this a negative for an informed, accountable foreign policy to have the government trying to crack down on reporters and, in this case, former colleagues?
Well, I also have worked with Jennifer Griffith at Fox News and Natasha Bertrand at CNN. They are two pros, superb reporters, nonpartisan, really hardworking. They do a great job. And so, I think, as you alluded to earlier, Ari, the politicization of intelligence is very dangerous. It's not in the national interest to do it, whether you're saying that Iraq does have WMD or Iran's nuclear program has been obliterated. It doesn't serve the national interest.
What we have here is a Trump cabinet collapse. His Trump cabinet meetings are ending in disaster, and the disasters are spilling out in the public. Like, the reason we see Hegseth so unhinged is because he knows his job's on the line, and he knows this operation was a failure, at least in public relations. The polling is against it. The rationale for it is it doesn't pass the smell test. Too many Americans remember Iraq, right? You guys remember it. Too many Americans remember it. Too many Americans remember mission accomplished. Too many Americans remember we'll be welcomed as liberators, and it's going to take a couple weeks and we'll be in and out. Like, people remember all of this. And so that's bad enough. But then it turns out that, at least according to some sources, now this is info that's still coming out, maybe things will change, the operation wasn't even successful. Like, luckily, the planes weren't shot down and something. That would be a calamity for Trump if, American service people passed away on this mission. In that sense, everyone got back safely, thankfully. But, they may not have destroyed anything. If they set them back 3 months, what's 3 months? First of all, there's no point in doing any of this because there's no evidence for their project. But let's just live in the fantasy world that this was necessary. You failed. And so Hegseth his head's gonna roll before Donnie lets his own head roll. And so he's probably getting pressure behind the scenes, and he took it out on the media. The cabinet meetings are so toxic, it's leaking out into the public.